the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
All right, we're back here on the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm now joined by a first-timer, my favorite college football preview magazine that I got through while I was in Hawaii last week, and perfect time for my vacation to get completely ready for the college football season. It's one of the best college football preview writers and just college football writers in general over the years, Phil Steele. Phil, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Hey, I am doing great, Chase. How about yourself?
Not too bad. So, obviously we talk Tennessee here every day on the program, so we're gonna start there, Phil. I thought it was interesting because I've said on this the last few weeks here, and I want to get your perspective on if you agree with this, because one of the things I've noticed this summer, and I wonder if you've noticed the same, where a lot of people don't know what to do with Josh Heupel and this Tennessee team in 2024. I think it's the most difficult to extrapolate in terms of what their ceiling is, how low their floor is, depending on how things unfold. But I think what stands out to me, and that it's just kind of funny when you read different folks and listen to different folks, is okay, Tennessee's got a top 3, top 5 offensive line at worst in the SEC. Tennessee may have the very best defensive line. I know you're high on the defensive line at Tennessee this fall as well. And they also might have the best quarterback in the conference, at least in the next 2 years. Definitely the highest upside. And that's usually a recipe for real success in this league. And we saw how high this team could go before the injury and the mess at South Carolina. Is there part of you when you put Tennessee in the 20s here in your polling that you're like, man, I don't feel good about this, because there is a recipe here that Tennessee could be really special similar to what they did in 2022?
Yeah, there is. And in fact, in the magazine, I have got 4 teams tied for 5th in the SEC. So that tells you any of those 4 teams have the potential to burst up there to the top. And for the record, I think the SEC may get 5 teams into the playoff this year. Now, with Nico, the one thing I would worry about is, he had a great bowl game, no doubt about it. And we know his potential's through the roof. But I also haven't seen him start on the road in an SEC game. We have seen a lot of the other quarterbacks that are in the SEC do that. And there has been times, I've been doing this for 30 years, that a quarterback looks great in a bowl game, and then now expectations are super high for him during the season and doesn't quite live up to him. Now, I think he will be one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC. I would not go out and say he's going to be the top quarterback in the SEC this year. And then the other questions I have with Tennessee is the back 7 on defense. You touched on it, Chase. They've got a great defensive front, but all 7 starters off the back 7 are gone. So That's a question. You look at the schedule this year at Oklahoma, I think they'll be a dog. At Georgia, a dog. Potentially at home against Bama. Those are all tough games. But yes, Tennessee clearly has a potential to make the playoff this year, as do any of those teams I've tied for 5th in the SEC.
And, they're 16th in S&P Plus, 9th in Football Power Index. That's the highest I've seen in terms of the numbers bearing out what they think of Tennessee. I wonder, when it comes to the secondary and everything, when you look at just how good this defensive front with James Pierce, you're going to be able to rotate Pierce, Herring, and Joshua Josephs, and that'll be good. I think people might be a little bit over worried about Tyler Barron and moving on to Miami. I think Tyree West and Tyree Weathersby and company Dominic Bailey will be just fine there. And then the interior, I think, is the most underrated part of this Tennessee defensive line that Rodney Garner has built in terms of just Omari Thomas, Omar Norman Lott, Bryson Eason, who I think is going to have a really good year. Jackson Y from Stanford comes in, Elijah Simmons, they're just loaded. They're just going to be able to rotate so much. And when the linebacker, especially, I think people look at Elijah Herring, who led this team in tackles a year ago. I think they upgraded. I think Arian Carter is going to be a star at linebacker. Keenan Peely, if he's healthy for a full year, is going to be really good at the middle spot. So I think linebacker play will actually be a lot better this year. And then you can look at the changes with Kamal Hadden, who will be hard to replace in the back end. But I think the corners are going to be better with Ricky Gibson and Jamad McCoy coming in from Oregon State. And then the question for me, and I wonder if this is the biggest question for you in the back 7, is the safety spot, where Jacoby Thomas, Will Brooks, Andre Turrentine, John Slaughter, they're all fighting for those starting safety spots. Because Starr looks like Jordan Thomas, and then Boo Carter, who should be a really good player, 4-star freshman out of Chattanooga. But I mean, is it the safeties that has you most concerned, or do you think it's just the secondary as a whole? And also, if the defensive line is the best in the SEC, does that make you feel better about what the secondary needs to be? Because I mean, we just know that having a great pass rush and just a great front seven makes it a whole lot easier on the back end.
Yeah, there's no doubt when you look at the talent that Tennessee has at linebacker and at defensive back, they have the talented guys and maybe more athletic talent than last year overall.
Mhm.
And the defensive line is huge to any team because if you put pressure on the quarterback and can generate it with your 4 defensive linemen, then all of a sudden you don't have to blitz that extra guy. You don't have to play pure man-on-man on the outside. And it really is a plus overall. So yes, if all the pieces come together, there's a lot of if here. There's
Mhm.
not proven things out here. And there's other teams that look at Georgia, there's a lot of proven guys that are there. Same thing with Texas's defense, Alabama's defense, things like that. So I think Tennessee has tons of potential, but we just need to see it come through.
How surprised, like, because you see the Heisman odds for Nico and things like that. When you look at the bowl game and talking to the coaches, what do you think is going to be the most um, special part of Nico's game in Knoxville and what you've seen from the Heupel offense? What do you think is going to separate his quarterback play from Milton and Hooker and previous Dylan Gabriel, Drew Lock? What's going to make him different in the Heupel offense?
I think when you look at the running ability and then the downfield passing, I thought Milton last year missed a lot of open receivers down the field. I think if he could be more accurate in that, which looked like it, I mean, that was a heck of a defense they took on in the bowl game
Mm.
in Iowa. And then, of course, the mobility factor thrown in there. He's going to be a tough quarterback to handle.
When you think about the Heupel era through 4 year or going into year 4 at Tennessee, Phil, what are you still most curious about? What's your biggest question about whether like what this can ultimately be and what Heupel can ultimately do at Tennessee? Does this still feel like an upward trajectory? Do you think they've kind of plateaued? Do you think what we saw in 2022 was the pinnacle of what they could be in the SEC and with their roster construction, or do you think there's still more levels and you think they're going to continue to rise over the next 2 years?
No, I think Tennessee can get back to being a national title contender. No doubt about that. I think when you look at the quality of the transfers he's been bringing in, the quality of the freshmen that he's been bringing in, this team clearly can get there under Josh Heupel. So I'm a Heupel. I like what Heupel's doing there, and I think he clearly has that potential with Tennessee.
One of the things I go back and forth on with the receiver room, because I think this is just the deepest receiver room Heupel's had at this point, and he's talked about it. They're going to have a lot of options. I mean, they have some true freshman options. I think Mike Matthews is going to play some this fall. Are you one of the most interesting position battles to me? Because Brew's got a starting spot when he's back, and Squirrel's obviously going to start in the slot. That other spot out wide is really interesting to me because it could be Chris Brazzell, it could be Dante Thornton, it could still be Caleb Webb. We don't know. What what do you like most about that Thornton Brazzell matchup? And do you think which one would you bet on more likely to pop on the outside of that third spot this year?
Yeah, I went with Brazzell in
Mm,
the starting spot just because the experience level that he has. I mean, his athletic ability is through the roof. He's one of the better guys that you could just throw it up and he's going to go up and get the ball for you. At
mhm.
that big touchdown in the spring game, as you recall. Now,
Yep.
that's not discounting Dante Thornton at all. He's got the size and speed that you want out of a receiver position. He just, I think his problem has been staying healthy. He gets
Yeah.
nicked up a bunch. So, with the fact that Brazzell has been able to stay on the field more, that's why I went with him ahead of Thornton.
I like it. What's your what's the best case scenario for Tennessee this year? Do you think it's CFP and win a couple games? Do you think it's CFP one and done? Do you think that there's a path to the SEC title game? Like does it is there when you because you talk about like there's they might I think they're gonna be favored ultimately against Bama at home by the time they get there. We'll see. I think a lot of it's gonna depend on how they play against Florida. And that when you talk about winning on the road in the SEC, I think they're going to end up splitting Arkansas and Oklahoma in those back-to-back weeks on the road. It just that's one of the actual bugs with Heupel to this point at Tennessee is they've struggled on the road. Like you said, a lot of teams struggle on the road, but like go back to Gainesville last year and what that was, and one of the hard parts is you can't replicate the crowd noise, right? Like, it's just really hard for coaches in practice to replicate what it's like to be on the road in these crazy SEC atmospheres. But I don't know. I think, in my estimation, it does feel a lot like 2022 in a way leading up to this season. I I think they're a CFP team, and I think they should be. There is a path to the top three, and maybe even an SEC title berth. Am I drinking too much orange Kool-Aid here, Phil?
Yeah, the SEC title game berth seems a tough path to get to
Mhm.
it. There's a lot of good teams in front of them. Georgia, Texas, Alabama, and Ole Miss all, I think, have better paths to get there. But I mean, the potential's there for Tennessee. If all this potential that we've been talking about in the defensive back seven, quarterback position comes to fruition, they find that depth at running back. Remember, they lose two of the top three running backs. They're still very solid,
Mm,
but can they be as deep as they were last year? That would be my question marks. The Oklahoma and Georgia games on the road are going to be tough, but
yeah.
I think Tennessee's got an excellent chance of making a playoff. Advancing all the way to the title game, I don't know if they have the depth. I mean, if you take a look at the overall talent Georgia
Yeah.
has compared to Tennessee, the experience talent, and they go three deep at every position, I still think they may be a year or so away from actually competing for the national title. But I'll throw this out in the FCS playoffs,
Mm.
which had been expanded. The third place team in the Colonial Division actually played in the title game 2 out of 3 years. It
Huh.
becomes a battle of attrition down the stretch, who stays the healthiest. So once you make the playoff, I mean, anything's possible.
I love it. Switching gears here a little bit in the SEC. I Am I crazy for thinking the bottom falls out and South Carolina goes 3-9 this year?
I think you are.
Okay.
I like South Carolina this year, and here's the reason why. Last year, their offensive line was just massively hit by injuries. They were down to I think they lost 12, 13 guys on the offensive line. That affected the entire offense. And while they lose Spencer Rattler, I really like Lenore Sellers. He is, 6'3", 240 pounds. They got Robbie Ashford behind him. They're going to be a completely different offense this year. Last year, they basically had to throw the ball. They couldn't run it. They
Mm.
only averaged 85 yards per game on the ground, 2.8 yards per carry. Well, they bring in Rocket Sanders, who I thought was one of the best running backs in the SEC 2 years ago, banged up last year.
Mm.
They got Oscar Attaway back there, Juju McDowell. I think they double last year's rushing total offensively, especially with a mobile quarterback and a veteran offensive line. They've added in some nice weapons at the receiving core with Larvadane and Jared Brown. And defensively, I like what they've got there. Debo Williams at weak side linebacker, Huntley up front at the defensive tackle spot. There's eight starters back on the defensive side of the ball. I think South Carolina is going to be a sneaky team this year. They made my most improved list, which means I think they go from a losing year to a bowl game. Every team that's on my most improved list had a losing record last year, and I expect to be in a bowl. So I'm going to disagree with you on that one, Chase.
I guess a lot of it too is just the schedule. I think they got like this is a rough schedule, and I think that we're gonna know a lot about the South Carolina team on the road in week 2. Like going to Kentucky and kind of like both fan bases really need that one. Like that's I think a sneaky huge game for both sides, and both administrations kind of need that to get the goodwill with the Stoops, the flirtation with Texas A&M, and just how it finished last year for South Carolina. And then you get LSU at home the week after. I mean, you get Ole Miss early on the schedule. You get at Alabama, at Oklahoma. A&M comes in. You still close at Clemson this time. I don't know this. Do you like when you look at the schedule? Why do you feel that this can be a bowl type team? Because I don't know. I have to really squint to see it.
Yeah, I love South Carolina's home field edge. In fact, Shane Beamer
Mm,
is 15-6 at home. And this is probably the best team that he's put on the field in his 4 years there. They get
mm.
LSU at home. I'm not giving that one to LSU. They
Okay.
got Mississippi at home. I'm not giving that one to Ole Miss. They get Texas A&M at home. I've got them favored in that one. They get Missouri at home. I've got them favored in that one. So I don't think there's a lot of difference in the SEC between teams 5 and 10. And South Carolina gets a lot of those key games at home. And I
Mhm.
think that's going to make them a surprise, more of a surprise team this year. I do think they take care of business in Columbia, South Carolina.
Final one here for you, Phil. On the flip side, I think I'm a little bit more optimistic on Florida than a lot of folks, especially here in Knoxville. But I think they're going to be good. And then I think they might very well be undefeated going into Knoxville. I hope that's not the case, but I think there's a path there, and I think they should at least make a bowl game. And it wouldn't surprise me if they got to 7-5, 8-4. Do you feel the same?
I do, Chase. I think you're 100% accurate there. When you look at Florida, let me. When I talked to Coach Napier last year, and I was highly skeptical of Graham Mertz, and I said, first of all, he doesn't fit your offense, Coach. Wasn't overwhelmed with what I saw out of him in Wisconsin, and then Coach Napier gave me a long narrative as to why he liked Graham Mertz. And guess what? He was right. 73% completions, 20 touchdowns, just 3 interceptions. Great leader, first in, first out, highly intelligent. Now they got DJ Lagway backing him up, giving him a different dimension out of the quarterback position. The defense looks loaded this year. This is the best defense. And remember, Mike Norvell, for example, his first 2 years at Florida State, losing years, hot seat, and then what happened with Florida State? He inherited Dan Mullen's recruits. Dan Mullen wasn't a great recruiter. Well, Napier has now 3 really good recruiting classes, and his first 2 years at Florida were both inexperienced. Last year, they were number 109 on my experience chart. This year, they're all the way up to number 52. And when I talked to Coach Napier this year, I was like, Coach, that schedule, oh my God. And he's like, Phil, I think when you take a look at the end of the year, it's not going to be as tough as you think, which means they win some games, and all of a sudden you look at their opponents and you say, well, maybe they could get it. So yes, can they be 5-0 when they travel to Tennessee? I think the key there, Chase, is the first game of the year, Miami of Florida. If they take care of business in the Swamp there, where they're very tough, they beat Tennessee in the Swamp. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes.
But if they take care of business in the Swamp this year, I do think 7-8 wins is a distinct possibility for this team. They also make my most improved list.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think Billy's right in terms of just how this is going to look. I mean, my gut is, but someone has to the bottom. We can end here, Phil. Like the bottom has to fall out, or someone with the expansion and with Texas and Oklahoma coming in here. Who do you feel? I mean, it's on the negative side, but who do you think? If it's not South Carolina, not Florida, is it Kentucky for you? Who's that team that they're going to have the type of season, and you're going to look at the win-loss record come December, and you're going to be like, whoa. This is something we haven't really seen from that program, and this is very unexpected. Who is that for you?
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be as unexpected. I looked at the SEC media poll, but there's when you look at Mississippi State, they're a team that their bottom level has been 4 or 5 wins the last 10 years. In fact, they're 73-54 the last 10 years. I think it's going to be tough for them to win a lot of games. Jeff Lebby comes in, brand new offense, and wasn't overwhelmed with what I saw talent-wise from the squad. They also have a really tough schedule. They get Florida at home. I think Florida's got a really good chance in that game. In fact, I favor Florida. They put Texas A&M at home. The Arkansas game might be a winnable one, but they play the majority of the tough opponents on the road this year. I think Mississippi State's going to struggle, and this from a team that really has had a great record the last 10 years.
Yeah, it just feels like post-Sylvester Grimm, it's been pretty solid, and I think Jeff Lebby is actually going to end up working out there, but like you said, it might just be a rough year one. But we've seen Mike Leach, Dan Mullen, the fun kind of offense, different kind of offense that isn't talent-reliant succeed in Starkville. So, Phil, what can the good folks check out from you all across the internet? We can get the Phil Steele College Ball Magazine at Barnes & Noble, where I got mine. We can get it on philsteele.com. Anything else you want to plug here before we wrap up today?
Yeah, Chase, the magazine, in case you've never seen it, is 352 pages, gives you 2 full pages on all 134 teams that are in the magazine. We give you the same amount of coverage on Akron that we do on a team like Alabama or Florida, 2 full pages. And you can only get it at Barnes & Noble and Books A Million. Those are the only 2 brick and mortar stores to get it. But you can also get it at philsteele.com. And when you go to philsteele.com to order the hard copy, I'm going to charge you a shipping charge. It costs to ship things, but I give you the digital magazine absolutely free. And with the digital magazine, that's actually updated all the way through the start of the season. So if a player's out for the year, we'll circle them on your pages. Might even have some lines in there and things like for you, scores, things like that. So you can go to Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, or philsteele.com to get your magazine this year. But and I'm going to ask you, Chase, is it a magazine you're going to use all throughout the season? Use it weekly?
Oh yeah, especially for because I do the college football show with Matt Green where we preview and recap the games. Like it's my college football Bible during the season as I turn back and get ready for it. Because I will tell you my favorite nuggets that like. There's a lot I obviously love, Phil, that you put together. My favorite is the little nuggets for the schedule that you have for each team about like the history there and just like whether like if there's a bye or something like that, an additional nugget. What I've seen, like I love that because we can get caught up in, okay, maybe Virginia can do it this year against Virginia Tech. And then you have your little note, you go back and like, what did Phil remind me about this rivalry? And you go back and you're like, okay, I'm out of my mind here. I need to come back down to earth. So it's absolutely paramount for all college football readers and fans to circle back and check in each week, getting prepared for their team. And look, you want to be in the know. You want to know what you're up against, and you want to know everything about your team. Then the Phil Steele Mag is there. And Phil, can you promise me you're never going to go away from the hardback or the magazine, the physical copy? Because I always am going to need to be able to peruse through the physical one. I'm a big physical copy hard book person. I'm not a Kindle guy. Can you promise me that?
I can, Chase. We are definitely staying with the hard. I'm a hard copy guy, so
Yeah.
I would be remiss if I didn't have the magazine to flip through. So yes, we will always print the hard copy, and you can thank the good friends at Barnes and Noble for that. They, a couple of years ago, 2020, I was wondering if there's even going to be a football season. I'm wondering, do I print? Do I not print? They came out, stepped up to the plate, and bought the magazines outright and said, we need the magazine in our stores. So I love Barnes and Noble, and that's why we're exclusive with them and Books A Million.
And I guess a final thing here, the portal part of it. Have you gotten used to it now? With when it comes out, are you okay with or do you still have some sleepless nights as it goes to print of like, please, nothing major happen?
Yeah, actually, the thing we've done is gone to the press later. We used to go to the press in the middle of May, but you can't do that anymore. The portal closed on April 30th, and then what we had to do, we knew all the players that had hit the portal, but where did they land? So we gave it the entire month of May. The month of May for me is spent talking to the head coaches. I talked to 124 of the 134 head coaches this year, going over their team with them. So the whole month of May and then the first week of June. And I believe anybody that's going to have any impact this year signed in that span. There was a couple of stragglers here and there, but we've got everybody on the right team. There were actually magazines out there in the month of May, which means they had to go to the press before the portal even closed. They probably got players on the wrong team. I haven't looked at their magazine, but you have to assume that. But yeah, the portal has made it a little bit more difficult down the stretch. We go to the press later, but I've the coaches all text me. They say, hey, we got this guy. Hey, we got this guy. And it really helps me keep track of things.
Do you have to text Lane and be like, all right, Lane, you're the portal king, but enough is enough at a certain point. Like you got to decide on a running back. We can't keep doing this. I got to go to print.
Now, everybody pretty much, if you're worth signing, you sign before the school starts, which is generally the end of May. And then once that happens, once school starts, they're locked in. So going to the press June 7th, we're able to capture everybody.
There you go. Go pick it up today. Phil Steele, College Football Preview magazine that you can go get. Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, or on philsteele.com. Phil, thank you so much, and we'll have to check back in again soon.
Hey, sounds good, Chase. Great talking to you for the first time, buddy.
Absolutely. Thanks, Phil.
Thanks.
All right.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.